We'll be discussing the worldview number 5, which is called Psychoanalytic, which started by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was the first person to begin with talking, listening, and analyzing therapy. He started doing this by interviewing people that were suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from people such as women that endured harsh upcomings from like being raped and verbal and emotional abuse from their males in their life, and people that came from World War I and II who had extreme symptoms that no one can identify where they came from. He started off by discovering the ego, the superego, and the id. The ego, which is your rational decisions that you make every single day. Your id is your animalistic instincts, such as I want it now. Your superego is your moral coding. When these three egos are going through war or battle with each other, then you are considered mentally unhealthy. This worldview was discovered in the 1900s in Vienna, then transferred over to the United States and Europe. After interviewing many people with PTSD, Sigmund Freud came up with the 5 stages of the psychological development, such as infant, toddler, child, older child, and teenager. He came up with the theory that at each stage of their life, they go through a crisis, which each one must be resolved in order to be mentally healthy. Many people got influenced by Freud's ideas, such as Erik Erikson, from the 1930s through the 1980s. Erikson elaborated more on these stages and came up with 8 stages of the psychological development: the infant, the toddler, the young child, the older child, the teenager, the young adult, the middle-aged adults, and the older people. This worldview has carried on into today's modern world. Now today, psychologists have theories about the pattern of emotional attachments in childhood. Many therapies has come out of this worldview as well, such as marriage counseling, counseling in general, such as therapy sessions, service dogs. They also are used to help treat PTSD. In order to be considered mentally healthy, you have to have a good counterbalance between the superego, the id, and the ego. You know, you have to keep control like a referee does in a boxing match. The superego is your moral code, your ego is your rationality, and your id is your animalistic instincts. For example, you may have heard a person say there's a battle going on within them. This means that their ego/id is at war with their superego. Their ego is telling them not to do what they want to do in order to please the superego, which is the society. You know, they conform to what the society think is right. Their ego collapses and they need to repair it themselves, or they need to go to a therapist. To close up this worldview, if it wasn't for Sigmund Freud, then people wouldn't understand who they are or why they are the way that they are. All he did was give a listening ear. You know, a lot of people didn't have that back then in his time. So just for him to just sit down and actually listen to what they had to say, he saved many lives. Now we are going to be discussing worldview number 4, functionalism. Functionalism was started by William James in the 1900s in the United States. William James went through many careers in his life before he figured out exactly what he wanted to do, which was psychology. He was the father of psychology. He created the ability to adapt. His ideas were influenced by Charles Darwin's theory when he established how animals adapt. William James came up with the idea, or the question, how does people adapt to the difficulties we endure every day in life? One of those people that was highly influenced by William James was Bill W. In the early 1920s through the 1930s, Bill W. was a stockbroker before the economic crash. He had a serious alcohol problem, and a lot of people around him ignored him. Priests shunned him for the way he was. His family didn't understand why he continued to drink. Well, in the 1930s, he established one of William James' books, and he read it and he got an idea to group up with people who had the same similar problem with him, and they talk it out and help each other out. The birth of which we know now, Alcoholic Anonymous, AA, was started in a hotel room. Bill W. was at a hotel and he was tempted to drink until he noticed, I don't have to drink anymore. And he got a phone, went on a payphone, and he called many of priests to ask, hey, can you find me somebody that's just like me, an alcoholic? And that's when he found Bob S., which was a former doctor, but he lost his license because he was an alcoholic. Together, they started the 12-step program, which we know today as Alcoholic Anonymous. The 12 steps of the program is, number 1, we admit that we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives has become unmanageable. The step number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can help us restore our sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn over our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Number 4, make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admit to God, to ourselves, that other human beings, the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, we are entirely ready to have God remove all those deficiencies of character. 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, make a list of all the people we have harmed or become willing to make amends with them people. No matter how hard we try, even if they don't come back, at least we try. Number 9, make direct amends to such people whereas possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the acknowledgement of His will for us and the power to carry out. Number 12, have had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. We try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice the principles in all of our affairs. Once Bill W. went through these steps, he had a spiritual awakening and he was sober for the rest of his life until his death. Another person that was highly influenced by William James was Parson. Parson established the very first institute of career counseling. He wanted to know, how do I match somebody with a job that is right for them? How do I make people happy in their everyday lives? Because before in time, if you were good at something or you just seemed like you were good at something, then they would have put you in that job instead of knowing who you truly are. In order to be mentally healthy in this worldview, you must have the ability to function, work, and be happy. You have to admit that you have an addiction and seek help. You have to be wise. You have to want to help others, or at least seek the good in others. And last but not least, you must have a personal relationship with a higher being. You don't have to be a part of an organized religion per se, but you have to be spiritual. It's just one of the things you must be. Functionalism is very theistic. It is more about being spiritual than being a part of an organized religion. As I said before, you have to obtain a relationship with a higher being in order to overcome an addiction. Although Parsons' idea or theory wasn't so much theistic, he still helped many people by discovering career counseling. Now let's recap.
After just 6 months of war, 15% of the British Army was judged to be suffering from the condition. The most extreme cases were blind, deaf, mute, or shaking, yet all without an apparent cause, other than their proximity to bombardment. Similar cases appeared in the French and German armies on the Western Front.
Mine! I deserve it! I want it all! It should be mine!